Hi guys, this is Rich with Wild Wonderful Weekends, and I've decided to do a series of videos on advanced photography and videography techniques using the DJI Pocket 2 instead of a larger DSLR platform. Now, as much as I enjoy this little camera, it's not technically a professional photographer's tool. It definitely has its limitations, but when you push it to those limits, you really can get some amazing pictures and videos with it. And that's what this series is going to be all about. In this first video, what we're going to do is take a look at this camera's ability to capture very slow motion video and long exposure photographs to get some cool shots of sparks emitting off of burning steel wool. Now, if you like these videos or find them interesting, please like and subscribe. I'm going to show you a clip that I shot earlier, and then I'm going to tell you exactly how to set your camera up to take that kind of footage. And I'll also tell you what equipment you need for this type of shot as well. I should mention here that anytime you play with fire, there's a risk of injury and or damage to property, potentially very serious. So this video is only for information purposes. If you decide to actually try any of the things outlined here, you do so at your own risk. Take every precaution to prevent fires, burns, and damage to property. Make sure no one and no thing is close by, as molten pieces of steel wool will fly off as you swing it around. It can be interesting to split the video in post and change the speed to be faster in some places than others. I also reverse the direction and use cross-dissolve transitions to blend the different slices of video. You can experiment on your own and see what you like. Okay, before you actually do this shoot, you're going to want to make sure that you or whoever's swinging the burning steel wool are wearing the correct type of clothing. Particularly for safety, you want to make sure you have closed-toed shoes, long pants, long sleeves, gloves. You could even use face coverings. You definitely want some type of head covering and eye protection. Now, when I shot the clip that you just saw, I wanted my face and my hat to show up, so I didn't use face coverings, and I wore a light gray cap. Next, you'll need some fine steel wool. I use quadruple zero, which is the finest grain or grade steel wool that you can get. The coarse stuff is a little too thick to ignite, and it doesn't burn well. You can pick this stuff up just about anywhere, or you can use the links in the description to order just about everything I use in this video, which helps the channel, and I definitely appreciate immensely. You'll also need something to hold the steel wool while it burns. I use a metal egg whisk, which works very well. It's important that the whisk is made entirely of metal and not plastic, because plastic will melt and hurl a fireball in some unpredictable direction. And lastly, you'll need a freshly charged 9-volt battery to ignite the steel wool. Okay, when you actually load your steel wool into your metal egg whisk, you want to make sure that you jam it in there well enough so that it's not going to fly out once it's been swung around. But you also want to tug on it a little bit to make sure there's enough air in there so that it actually will burn while you're swinging it and after you ignite it. And once you're happy with how you have it, of course, you're going to need something to attach to that whisk that you can actually swing it by. And I'm using braided cotton cord. And you'll want a length that's long enough to where it almost touches the ground when you're at the bottom of your swing, but not quite actually hitting the ground. To ignite the steel wool, press both poles of the 9-volt battery onto it. As soon as the wool starts to smolder, remove the battery and begin swinging the chain. The rush of air over the wool will cause it to burn faster and emit sparks. One last word about safety: the smoke from the burning steel wool should not be inhaled. Okay, let's go ahead and get our camera set up to shoot this video clip. The first thing I like to do is set it to Pro, so you can swipe from top down to set it to Pro, and then just right to left until you get to Pro, and then just tap that to turn it on. And then you can swipe bottom to top to get back. Okay, and now we are going to click, or rather tap the Pro icon, and we're going to make sure it's set to single autofocus. The choices are single or continuous, and we want it to display single. Now we can swipe bottom to top, and we can swipe right to left now to choose slow motion, and right to left again to choose 1080p 8 times. Now we're not going to worry about our exposure settings, because as soon as we select slow motion 8 times 1080p, it's going to set up some parameters that we can't go past anyway. For instance, the shutter speed could not be slower than the frame rate. So I'm just going to leave it on auto exposure. And now we can swipe left to right to get back to our screen. And anywhere we touch now on our screen, it's going to focus in that area. It's a good idea to put your camera on a tripod rather than having someone hold it. That way everyone can be at a safe distance and your footage will be nice and stable. It's easiest if you have a second person to help you, either swinging the wool or operating the camera. To make sure the camera was focused correctly, I had my wife shine a flashlight on me while she touched the screen to focus. If you're working alone, you can stand something in exactly the spot where you'll be standing and focus on that. When you're finally ready to shoot, press the record button, ensure that everyone's at a safe distance, and ignite the wool. So this is really just to get you started using this technique. You can use your imagination and look up inspiration online to find more ways to make this a little more dramatic. One of the things I've done in the past is to use it over water, and those reflections make it look really cool. You can also use it like in a cave where the stone walls can safely bounce back the sparks. That can also make some really interesting footage too. Okay, now that we've shot some slow motion video of burning steel wool, let's try some long exposure photography. The supplies and setup are exactly the same, but we will need to change our exposure settings like so. Okay, let's go ahead and get our camera set up for still shots now. So the first thing we're going to do is sweep right to left and choose photo. And then we're going to swipe right to left again and choose a 4:3 ratio, and I'm going to put a 3-second delay, and that'll give my assistant enough time to get to safety after they hit the record button. So I swipe right to left, and now I'm going to tap the Pro icon, and I'm going to tap exposure, and I'm going to turn it to manual, and I'm going to set it to 1 second and ISO 100. Now that's just a starting point. As I start shooting and I look at the results, I may adjust that shutter speed. I may even adjust the ISO, but I kind of doubt it because this camera has a 1.8 aperture, which is really wide open, and I'm betting it's going to record pretty bright, that burning steel wool on the still shots. But that's where we'll start, and I'm leaving it on single focus because I want to be able to tap once to focus on me, and then that not try to track focus once it starts shooting. Now that the camera is set up, ignite the wool and start swinging. Have your camera operator hit the shutter button as many times as it takes until the steel wool burns out. Experimenting in post with contrast, highlights and shadows, and color temperature can yield even more interesting results. Here are a few of my favorite shots that I got today and the camera settings that I used. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to doing more things along this line with the Pocket 2, and I hope you stay tuned for those. Take care.